Hi, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Women in Math and STEM, where our mission is to reach out to as many professionals, aspiring professionals, students, whatever you name it. We try to reach out to them, who essentially support the initiative of bringing more women and young girls into the STEM field. So, with that being said, as always, feel free to open up the description or transcript to better follow along, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Hello, and thank you so much for coming to the call today and talking with me. Just to sort of start off, do you mind briefly introducing yourself and sort of walking us through your journey and how you eventually ended up in math education and consulting?
Sure. My name is Eileen Murray, she, her, and I am now in probably my 25th year in education. I actually knew I was going to get into education quite early. It was probably when I was in high school when my teacher started to recognize my natural ability to explain things to my peers. And in fact, when I was a senior in calculus, my teacher started to have me do some guest lectures, which was super fun. So it really inspired me to think about teaching. So I knew it was going to be math. And I really felt like it was going to be education. So when I entered into college, of course, I was a math major, but that inspired me to think about becoming a research mathematician. I went to graduate school, very quickly realized that I didn't want to be a research mathematician. So I had a little bit of a detour in math major and actuarial work, but then wound up back in education. So I started teaching high school. And then after 5 years of teaching, realized that I really needed more just personal education. So I went to graduate school for mathematics education because the other thing I was thinking about was I could impact, the 100 kids in my classroom, or I could teach teachers and impact hundreds of classrooms. And so it was like this idea of expanding my impact. So I went to graduate school for mathematics education, graduated with my doctorate, and started as a faculty member. Was also a postdoc for a little bit, but eventually landed in Montclair State University, where I was faculty for 6 years. I got tenure and was promoted to associate professor, and then took a job at a nonprofit. So left the university, took a job at a nonprofit where I worked for about 3 years, where I was the director of strategic initiatives and then the chief academic officer, where I was supporting a large fellowship program for K through 12 STEM teachers in the New York City public schools. And so I worked specific needs along with our professional learning department, and thinking about program evaluation and things like that. After 3 years, wound up leaving the nonprofit and starting my own educational consulting firm, where I now support both educational researchers in their research and practice, as well as teachers in the classroom doing professional development workshops and instructional coaching.
Wow, that's a lot of great work. I was just wondering, since you've had so much experience in teaching, what have been some of the most memorable or rewarding experiences you've had while teaching students or even like teaching teachers?
Yeah, so I was really inspired early on, in my high school classroom. I was, obviously a very young teacher, not very much experience in the classroom. But one year I was able to teach honors calculus, and because it was an AP calculus, we had really kind of more freedom to do fun stuff. And I remember getting the students to agree to just try something out with me. And I had this idea of modeling the motion of people on a swing, and to see if we could find a function that would best model that motion. And so we went to the playground, we took data and things like that. And what was really interesting is we never really found the function that would best do it, because all of a sudden we started thinking about, well, what about that split second you stop moving, and all these different things. And what was so rewarding is that they actually, at that point in the year, knew that we weren't necessarily going to come to a nice, neat answer, which is really how I imagine mathematics is. We learn in school so much that you're going to end up with an answer. And so a lot of math students are like, I need the answer. But at that point, we had enough philosophical conversations where they were okay with the ambiguity. And that felt really good because, you know, so many high school students don't actually get that experience and understand that that's really a huge part of mathematics.
Speaking of keeping math interesting and interactive, I was just wondering if you had any strategies you do in your classroom or you tell other teachers to keep your students engaged.
Yeah, so, you know, really, I haven't had my own classroom in a while now. And so I'll speak towards what I observe in the classes where I'm doing instructional coaching and what I tell those teachers. Really, I believe that students find acknowledgement of their ideas and validation of their thinking to be the most motivating. And so I really try to help teachers really actively listen to what their students are saying and doing so that they can work with the students' mathematics instead of trying to have the students match their mathematics. So, you know, when I was in elementary school and, you know, going through elementary, middle school, and high school, I was identified as a strong math student because I was really good at doing whatever the teacher was doing. But then when I went to graduate school, I quickly realized that that was not mathematics. And I actually struggled in the first couple of years while I was getting my master's in mathematics because I had never truly been pushed to think independently and had people talk to me about my own thinking. I was always matching somebody else's. And so I really try to help the teachers develop that skill and actively listening, and then figure out how to use prompts and questioning in a strategic way as opposed to a technical way. And what I mean by that is strategic is saying, how did you come to that? What information were you using? Can you show me what you mean? And technical is, well, do this step. This is the next thing you should do, which honestly is super boring, I think.
Sounds good. I was also just curious about any of the challenges you've experienced, especially when teaching teachers, or like if like the pandemic affected your work at all.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So I actually left the university the spring of 2020. And so I only wound up having to teach online for a couple of months, and it was bonkers. It was really difficult and it was really hard to keep students motivated because like in the classroom, like I'm very animated and I walk around and I can, you know, work with the students, and online, especially in the very beginning, that was terrible. And so it was really challenging. And then a lot of my consulting work that's when I went into to the nonprofit. And so, you know, I was facilitating adult learning for practicing teachers online, which was honestly a little bit easier as a learning environment because the adults are more motivated. Like they're you know, purposely coming to these learning opportunities. It's not a class that I have to attend, so it was much different. But I have to say that, you know, it is a huge challenge even post-pandemic with the teachers, is like students are showing up differently. The pandemic did actually impact students of all ages in different ways. So depending on what grade you're in and depending when the pandemic was, where your students are right now is different. So my strategies in terms of what I do and how I work with teachers has had to change because our students have changed. The world is much, much different. And so it's trying to figure out those strategies that are going to reach students who maybe don't want to interact with their peers face to face, or maybe have some like, you know, really like impactful gaps in knowledge that we used to assume students would come in with. So it's thinking beyond just mathematics education and looking at other disciplines to see what tools they potentially use, and then trying to integrate those into the mathematics classrooms.
I see. Sort of on the same note, I was just curious about your opinion as to where math education would be in 5 years or in like a decade from now.
Yeah. I mean, my hope is that we continue in mathematics education to look across disciplines um, to like innovate on how students are learning mathematics currently. Our world is changing. The mathematics education model, or what most students experience in their math classrooms right now, is a remnant of 100 years ago. And our society is different. our knowledge structures are different. What people need to actually engage in with society is different. And so, just even thinking about data science or data analytics, technology, engineering, like all of those things. And so my hope is that we continue to move towards this integrative approach and eventually change the nature of what we view as the mathematics people need K through 16. That would be my ultimate dream.
Sounds good. And I was also wondering if you had any pieces of advice for students who are interested in either pursuing a career in math or math education in the future.
Yeah. So one of the things that's really helped me the most in terms of mathematics education and mathematics is staying curious. Not just saying, oh, that person told me to do it that way, I'm fine, but really starting to think about, well, why does that work? How does that work? Is there a different way that I can do this? Is there another way I can do it? Because that curiosity really helps you develop a much deeper understanding of the content. And the deeper understanding of the content you have, the more flexibility you then have in terms of how you talk about it with other people. So if you want to become a teacher, knowing something in multiple ways, also knowing how people might misunderstand it, all of those things help you become a much better teacher. And it's much more interesting for you than to just do the same thing the same way every day. Teachers burn out when they do that. And so if you want to be a teacher and you think you want to be it for life, stay curious, stay asking questions, and, have fun with it.
Sounds good. I was also just curious about when you encounter like a difficult problem or difficult scenario it seems really hard to like conquer firsthand or you might feel discouraged. I was wondering if you had any pieces of advice for sort of overcoming that challenge and staying in there.
Talk to others. Collaboration. So the other, I think sometimes people think that mathematics is an independent activity. That's not how mathematicians work. Mathematicians work collaboratively all the time. They talk to their colleagues a lot. And frequently what I find is when you even just saying the problem out loud to somebody and the questions then they ask you helps to get different ideas and sometimes helps you break through whatever block you have about a problem. So talk to people.
Sounds good. And just to sort of end off, I was wondering if you had any last words you wanted to share with the audience.
I mean, I just think that right now, what I see across the educational landscape is a lot of teachers who are discouraged and a lot of teachers leaving the profession, which is really sad because honestly, education and teaching is one of the most rewarding and most needed things that we have in our country. And so I would just encourage people to really think about teaching and to not get discouraged and to really trust in the fact that we are starting to move in the right direction in terms of education and that educators are well respected and they are tremendously needed. And honestly, if you go to it and you form relationships with students, it'll be some of the most rewarding relationships you have.
Okay, thank you so much. It was amazing talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you.